Hey everybody, welcome back to Zeros of the Tabletop. This is Nate. I just want to give you a little introduction before we jump into the episode. First off, I want to apologize for there not being an episode last week, which was really confusing for me because there was. I found out it was because the website we're using that's hosting our podcast has a maximum file size that our Redcon episode went over, and I somehow missed that during the upload. So everything on my end looked like it uploaded just fine. When I looked at it, it said the episode was uploaded, but for whatever reason, it blocked it or just kept it from being published. I've looked into it, and there's a way around it. So now when you guys should have this episode, the Redcon should be available as well. I just didn't know about it at the time, so I totally didn't catch it. And for that, I am sorry. So now technically you'll have 2 episodes to listen to. I just wanted to also apologize for how awful I sound right now. The episode's not going to be like this. I've been a little out of commission. It's no secret. I think I've mentioned it before. I work in retail. And so it's been a busy couple of weeks for me. And then somehow right in the middle of all that madness, I picked up what I thought was just a little head cold. Turns out it was the flu. So I've actually been out of commission for the last week. Haven't been able to edit any of the old episodes just to bring up their sound quality or really do much of anything. I've been pretty much bedridden while I'm trying to fight this. Good thing is, before I got sick, I managed to record some more episodes with Cheyenne, this time with 2 mics. Woo! So the quality is so much better. And so we won't have to worry about that old quality issue anymore. Now everything should sound amazing. And then throughout the next few weeks, I will edit and upload those old episodes again now that I'm starting to feel a little better. But I hope you guys enjoy the episode. It sounds so much nicer with both mics. I don't know what I was thinking trying to do it with one. And yeah, enjoy the episode. Welcome back, everybody. This is We the Fandom again. Joining you as always, myself, Nate, and
Cheyenne.
And a big yawn coming from Cheyenne.
Yes, sorry.
You must not have had enough time to sleep. Speaking of time...
Oh, good gosh.
We're talking about time travel this week. Where do we want to start? We probably want to start with some of our favorite experiences of time travel in fiction, not the real world. We don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, but...
So I don't know about you, but there are a lot of movies about time travel.
So many movies about time travel.
Going off some of the ones I wrote down here, the obvious ones, Back to the Future, all 3 of them, Groundhog Day, the Terminator films, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Looper was another one I remember, and I've got a couple favorites. One, I'm not really sure if it counts as time travel or not. We can discuss that. Do you have any other favorites that jump out at you?
The Time Machine.
The Time Machine, of course, H.G. Wells.
Based off the book, yeah.
Yes.
You got the movie, the most recent movie, because you know that they've made it several times, obviously. And then, yeah, the book. One of my favorites, personally.
So one of my favorite, probably ever time travel film is a Spanish film called Time Crimes.
Okay.
I think the original title is like Los Cronos Crimes or something like that. I'm gonna butcher it. So we're gonna go with the English title, Time Crimes, which is a really bizarre film that's essentially 4 loops of the same character through the same day. And each loop sort of complicates and builds on the other ones.
Okay.
And so the main character's name is Hector, and he's running from a strange masked man who, in later loops, we discover is actually himself a few loops in time later where he smashed his face in a car accident.
Okay.
And wrapped a bandage around it, not realizing that it made him look exactly like the guy he was running from until much later.
Oh, fun.
When he realized, and then had to, in order to keep it going, chase himself into the facility where the time machine was.
Okay.
Order to keep the loop going. It's a super bizarre, probably the smallest time travel film I've ever seen. It all takes place on the same day, with the same like handful of characters in it.
Okay.
So it's not like, then this loop Hector went to the Wild West, or it's very much like the same day. He's just looping every 24 hours essentially.
Okay.
But it's really smart, really well thought out, and just bizarre. And I found it when it was on Netflix, like 5 or 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. Fell in love with it, and then when I went back and watched it a couple times, and then when I went to show a friend of mine a few years back, they had taken it off of Netflix.
Of course.
And the last time I saw it, I think it was available on Amazon if you had Prime, though I think that's changed since then. Now you'd have to pay for it. But it's a great movie. I highly recommend it.
Speaking of bizarre, though,
yes.
I thought of another one, Donnie Darko.
Yes. The time travel element that comes up at the end. That's definitely a weird one. Plus the whole, like future telling tubes of water or whatever that is.
Whatever that is. And I mean, that's not even talking about the rabbit.
Yeah.
You know. Frank, that's right. I was like, I know he has a name, but I couldn't think of it.
27? I can't remember the full, days. 3, I don't know.
And then the butterfly effect was another one that was,
Kutcher.
Yes, Ashton Kutcher before he went weird. Oh, and then Frequency.
I don't think I ever saw Frequency.
With, oh my gosh, who is that? Is that Dennis Quaid, I believe? Yes, Dennis Quaid.
Another Dennis Quaid.
Another Dennis
Quaid last week.
Yes.
Or last episode.
And then Jim Caviezel.
I've never seen that one. So, but my not really sure if it counts as a time travel film is Run Lola Run. That's probably leans more into a multiple reality film.
Yeah.
But just the fact that it's 3 different series of events that reset partial way through the movie, sort of made me think it's a borderline time travel movie.
Right.
Do we have any other time travel TV or books or any other media that we can point to as either being of quality or at least memorable? Because there's always Doctor Who.
Of course, there's Doctor Who, which I don't think has been mentioned yet, but I'm a huge fan, mostly of David Tennant, because he was my favorite.
I'm a big, of Doctor Who, David Tennant is my preferable Doctor.
Also loved Christopher Eccleston, though.
Eccleston was great.
Those two are my absolute favorites.
Nothing against Matt Smith.
Nothing against Matt Smith. No.
My brother really loves Matt Smith. I get it. Just
a lot of people who started after David Tennant left or started at the end of Tennant's run, they all love Matt Smith, and I'm just like, guys, nothing against him, but David Tennant. Okay, 10 is where it was at. Though, I mean, considering if he hadn't left, then he would probably still be the Doctor. I can't really blame him, but I will never get over it. I still haven't gotten over his last episode. The end of time is never gonna.
Good way to go out. That final bit of episodes were just great.
They were, yes.
Waters of Mars always will stand out in my head. It's just a good story.
The part that got me is when he's like, I don't want to go, and it wasn't 10 saying it. It was David Tennant saying it, and that. Even now, I'm getting a little choked up, and I will never be able to watch it again because I just can't. I can't deal with that agony on his face.
I feel like we haven't had a lot of, at least quality time travel, because there's been some out there, but the problem is time travel in TV is really easily used as like a scapegoat to explain plots that get set up but aren't fully thought out and that kind of thing.
They didn't do a bad job though with like 12 Monkeys, the TV show. I
haven't seen the TV show. So
I've seen some of it. I'm not. I haven't watched past like part of the second season, but they did a really good job with that as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a lot of the time it is just kind of a scapegoat to show what's going on.
I think some of my favorite usage of time travel on TV shows probably would come from something like Futurama. There's one where Bender, Fry, and the professor get into a time machine and go too far forward in the future.
Okay.
And can't go back. And so they keep having to... They're like, well, screw it, what happens if you go past like the end of time? Mm-hmm. Only to find out that like time is circular and that they're able to get back to where they were in their lives just by continuing going forward. It was such a bizarre concept that I found it very entertaining. And just
right.
But Futurama is one of those shows that always is smart enough, especially when it was in its prime, that I could take science fiction or just like actual scientific ideas and principles and like explore them in a very comedic way.
Right. 11/22/63. Did you ever watch that on Hulu?
I didn't. But I heard it was good.
I enjoyed it. Yeah. So basically, he goes back in time trying to stop the assassination of course, Kennedy.
Yeah.
11/22/63. But he gets sent back well before, so he has to live in the 60s because if he comes out of it, he still ends up going back to that exact day, the same day, in like 1960 or something like that. No matter how many times you leave and come back. So he has to stay there and he develops a life. And I mean, in the end, he does stop the assassination, but what comes after was probably my favorite because everyone always talks about how Kennedy was such a great president, and if he had lived, maybe the world wouldn't be where it is today.
Yeah.
That took that concept and just turned it on its head that, yeah, he was a great president, but in reality, beyond the presidency, he made a lot of questionable decisions in this life that he had after his presidency that just made the future, James Franco's actual present time, so very different and very effed up. It was a great show, and it kind of took what everyone kind of has as this general consensus that it would have been a good thing if Kennedy had lived, and kind of turns it on its head.
It's the same argument as like, what if we went back and
killed Hitler,
before he had a chance to rise to power.
Right. Well, I mean, that's not even bringing in the whole paradox thing. But we won't get there because I can't even...
that reminds me of probably my favorite short story involving time travel, which is the classic, I think it's Ray Bradbury again. I mentioned him last episode as well, which is A Sound of Thunder.
Okay.
And that one is about essentially like time traveling big game hunters.
Okay.
Where the wealthy can pay to go back in time and hunt animals, but it's all heavily monitored by this time travel agency. And so they have elevated walkways.
Okay.
So that way you're not going to step on some foliage that's, that or like damage something that could
negatively
affect the time. And they've picked out animals that are minutes from dying anyway.
Oh, okay.
And so it's not going to have any negative effect on the time stream as far as they can tell. It's a minimal risk instead of, killing something that would eventually,
be important for the species kind of thing.
Exactly. But in the story, one of the creature they're hunting is a Tyrannosaurus.
Okay.
And one of the hunters panics and steps off of the walkway, crashing into the jungle below. Mm-hmm. And while they are able to kill the dinosaur, and then it shows moments later a tree branch falling that would have killed it anyway. So everything there goes fine.
And as far as they can tell, no damage has been done. At the end of the story, they return, and humanity is totally different. Our speech patterns are different. I think there was something like, at the beginning of the story, they're talking about how in a recent like presidential bid, like the more moderate candidate had won out instead of the more extremist, but when they come back, it's the opposite.
Okay.
And they're panicking, trying to figure out why, and the hunter lifts his boot, and he had stepped on a butterfly.
Okay.
Which I read because I had read a summary, and I read that and I was like, is that the origin of the butterfly effect? It actually isn't. That comes from somewhere else, but it was popularized by that story.
Oh, okay.
And the idea that by stepping on that one butterfly, they alter time. And the sound of thunder at the very end is the sound of one of the hunters or one of the tour guides then killing that guy for altering the timeline.
Oh, okay.
So that's the last thing he hears is the sound of thunder.
Okay. Speaking of agencies that control time travel, the Umbrella Academy.
Mm-hmm.
I've read the comics. Super great. They don't go into as much detail with like that part of it, at least not yet. I don't know where they're going with it.
There's not that much of the comics available, right?
I mean, I have them, but
there's only like 3 or 4 major...
Oh, no, we're up to like 8, I think. 6 or 8.
I was going to say, not issue numbers, I was going to say like major storylines.
Oh, no, that's how many issues, but they're basically... It's all a continuation.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's not like Mike Mignolia's like Hellboy run or something where it's super long, detailed like.
No, you got like a bunch of stories.
It's very small.
They're much smaller. They're very So far we do have quite a few of the comics, and I mean, but the Netflix series has gone away from it.
An adaptation. You kind of have to expect them to go.
Right. It's an interesting take on it, but
love me some Hazel and Cha-Cha from that show.
Oh my God, I love.
Great.
There's a Hazel and Cha-Cha Save Christmas comic that I just saw. I haven't read it. I came up on my Amazon. I was like, I need this so bad. But yeah, no. So you got Hazel and Cha-Cha. You got the people that oversee, and that's where number 5 was. So it's a really interesting take on time travel and like people who are trying to preserve, the time continuum as we know it, sort of thing. Yeah. So making sure that Hitler takes over, things like that, major history events that happened, even though the history is different.
It's about making sure things are
exactly
consistent.
Yeah, because one of the big points in the comics is that which would take place after what we've seen in the Netflix series, is that we find out that number 5, when he defected, it was actually when he was supposed to be ensuring that Kennedy gets shot, and he didn't. So, and he just kind of like...
And that's one of the things that
travels back to when... And so, that's why he's being chased by Hazel and Cha-Cha in the comics and all of that. Of course, I don't know where they're going with it in the series, since we don't yet have a season 2. Yeah. But...
And they went back in time to their... Was it to their childhood? So was it the 80s or?
They didn't show where they were going really. They just showed like just the
children, yeah.
Right, but it just so we go back. So we see them as it's kind of like flashbacks in the series as them as kids growing up with the professor, which
maybe that's just how I took it, with the fact that it showed them as children holding hands.
Right.
But maybe I just took it as like, they're going back to when they were kids.
I might have to rewatch that because maybe it was.
It could be the rose-tinted glasses of me looking back on the finale.
Right. But yeah, and so it plays with it. There's a lot in the comics and even in the series that they're playing with time travel and like what can happen with it and all of that. So it's a really great. I thought it was a really well done version of time travel in both mediums. And then, of course, there is always the time traveler. Or wait. Time Machine. Sorry. The Time Machine.
Yes.
The original, which I read and is also really well done. It's an interesting take on it. It's, he goes so far into the future that life is completely different.
Yeah. I wonder if it was I'd have to do the research, but I wonder if it was like the first like apocalyptic future kind of story where
that is an excellent question. Yeah.
Like, everything's not better. It's
right. So and it doesn't really touch on it in that movie from the early 2000s, but it taught in the book. So the reason why you have those two factions is because you had the people who worked in, below ground. They were like the poor people, the working class who were keeping everything, and the people who lived above ground who don't actually use language really. In the book, they don't really talk. Is that they were the ones who were rich. They were the ones who, could do whatever. So they're really beautiful, and they're very like fair-skinned and elegant and all of that. And then you've got
Morlocks.
Morlocks, thank you. Yes, I completely forgot what they were called. Who lived underground. So they develop to that because they never came out from underneath the ground.
Yeah.
So they've completely adapted to that environment, and so they only attack the others who also had a name, and I can't remember.
Can't remember it. I only want to remember.
Started with an E, I think, if I remember correctly, and they would steal them at night for a food source because that's all they really had, because there wasn't anything, and they've got a bunch of machinery and stuff when our time traveler goes under there and all underground and everything looking for that, because he does go looking for the one that he had been communicating with, the one he had gotten to know from the above ground. And it's all told as it being, he's telling this group of people that he, like, of people he would meet with for, like, games and, like, card games and cigars in, like, the Gentleman's Club. And it's him telling this story. And then at the end, there's, like, they never saw him again. So it's kind of surmised that he did go back to that future, and he, decided to stay there in this different society and all of that. And it was just, it's H.G. Wells. Of course it was well written. I've enjoyed the two major books of his that I've read, War of the Worlds and The Time Machine. But The Time Machine was just... It gave rise to, that dystopian future where not everything is as pretty and polished as we like to think of it. And I thought it was, it's a really classic. It is a great story, and it's a classic, I
have one final one, and then we can switch to talking more about the genre, if you want to call it that. This book I read by Peter Clines, although, actually, I should be honest, it's an audiobook I listened to by Peter Clines, called Paradox Bound.
Okay.
It's a really interesting time travel / like road trip book where it's about people who are using classic cars in order to, and by classic I mean like Model T era cars.
Oh, nice.
In order to evade sort of like this weird faceless secret police. Okay. That are all about like preserving American history, and it's it was a really interesting story, especially when I already like a lot of other stories that Peter Clines has written, and without me realizing what was happening, he tied a loop in the middle of the story where the character at the beginning of the book meets himself, and I was so dumb for not realizing that. I'm like, oh my god, an idiot. Or no, I think he meets the woman he's traveling with at the same time as he's traveling with her in his future, but technically in the past. So there's a conversation where like the adult love interest is talking to him as a child, and that starts his fascination, which would eventually cause them to start traveling together.
Oh, okay.
And so it forms just this loop, and I'm just like, God, didn't see it coming at all. And when it happened, I was like, I'm dumb. But I really enjoyed it. It was just a good, like, fun fiction read.
Right. Yeah, that's always nice.
Not pretending to be anything other than a paperback that's just a fun read. But anyway, time travel. Why do we like it? Because the history and future is fun.
It is, you know, being able to go back and maybe see those things and then imagining what the future could look like. I mean, who doesn't wonder?
The questions of paradoxes and stuff like that are complicated, but also kind of fun to explore.
Yes. Yes.
Who doesn't love, like, sitting with your friend at, like, 2 a.m. and being like, Did Marty die in Back to the Future, like, on a loop until Doc was able to save him just in time? Like, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, on the line of paradoxes, I mean,
at the end of the day, I want a good story.
Exactly, but
I'm willing to forgive a story if it doesn't make perfect sense.
Then you're more forgiving than I am. Well, okay, so there was an episode, Stargate. Okay, this episode, first time I watched it, bugged the bejesus out of me. Second time I watched it, when I later rewatched the series, still bugged me so hard. Oh my god. So they know that they're looking for one of the ZPMs, you know, the power sources.
Yeah.
And they know that there was one in ancient Egypt. So they go to ancient Egypt because they have, like, the little space ones that can travel through time. So they go back to ancient Egypt, and they find it, but then there's no way for them to get it back to the future, because their machine got found by the bad guy, by, you know...
Villain of the week.
The villain of the week, yes. And so they can't. So they hide it in a box, and then it gets discovered and sent to them. And I'm just like, guys... So that they don't then travel back to the past. And I'm just, at the end of soap episode, I'm just like, guys.
It's like that.
You literally can't do that.
The whole, like, I'm going to put it in a P.O. box. And then, in the future, open that P.O. box. And it'll be waiting for me. I'm like, what happens when you haven't paid the the box? And, like, I goofed. What happens when you haven't paid the box in, like, 5 years? They're gonna open it up, like.
Right, but it's just like they leave it buried in the tomb. That is the reason why they, you know, were alerted to this, because it was like hieroglyphs that were on the tomb that they're like, oh, there's a ZPM there, and then they go back and
Are they the ones that chisel the ZPM into the tomb?
You know what? I have no idea. That is an excellent question.
Then that's a great loop.
But
we went on this quest because we went on this quest because we went on this quest because we went on this
right,
quest.
But that's just it, though. At the end of the episode, because they have the ZPM that was hidden away for them and then sent to them because they were told to send it or something. I'm not 100% certain of the details of that.
These hieroglyphs have English letter. Is this an address?
Oh no, it was just like, yeah.
Return to
and
sender?
then it sends it to them so that they don't have to go back in time. And I'm like, but guys, if you hadn't gone back in time, you wouldn't have gotten the thing, so you couldn't have, like, not gone back in time. It doesn't work. So that just, it drives me crazy. And I like how, like, Marvel is trying to be like, multiverse to fix that whole thing of the time heist, but at the same time I'm like, guys, paradox here.
Yeah.
And I liked that movie, but I just the whole paradox thing I just couldn't get past. I'm like, but guys,
my main ask in a movie with time travel is that if you set up something as a rule, you have to follow it. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's something like they're trying to... An accident happened on a train, and they're trying to repiece what happened. And so rather than actually having him time traveling, they're somehow having him, like, replay the events of a guy's memory who died during the attack. But then, like, halfway through the movie, he starts making changes, and I'm like, but... this isn't actually happening. This is happening in a simulation based off a dead guy's memories.
Right.
So, like, at the end of the day, he somehow saves people, and it's like, how? They're dead already.
Well, and they had something kind of similar in a Denzel Washington movie, where they're like, they find this dead girl, and then, like, a ferry blows up or something. Or the ferry blew up, and then they find this dead girl who was connected to it. And so they're, like, looking back with this crazy machine, and they're, like, making minor changes. So, like, a Denzel Washington's character is, like, warning her, like, oh, don't do this and don't do that because, you know, you're gonna die. And then like, at the end of the movie, she's alive. And I'm just...
Oh, yeah, I think I remember seeing... This came out fairly recently. So I think I saw...
It's a newer, yeah.
I think I saw a trailer for this. And I was just like... Where it's like... She died in a home in... No, I think maybe this is a remake or, like, a change to it. It's about a little girl who dies in, like, a home invasion. Okay. And he's somehow getting phone calls from her from the day before it's happening. And
okay,
so,
it's it sounds fairly similar to the movie I'm thinking of.
And it's just like, but she's all, like, there's a scene where he's, like, he's looking at her, like, dead body, because of course he's, like, roughneck detective, you know, and it's like, she's already dead, like.
Right, yeah, and that's the thing that got me is that, like,
the only way that would make sense...
She was dead.
The only way that makes sense is if by the phone calls existing, it causes an alternate universe to open.
Right, but it's never explained. It's just kind of presumed that everything's okay at the end of the day. And I'm like, I mean, no?
I think that concept would be a lot more interesting if you played it off instead of a happy ending as more of a tragic one.
Right.
Where it's like... Sort of the idea that there's a main timeline with smaller timelines branching off of it, and right now
the multiverse.
And right now the main timeline, however you want to call that, is the universe where a character has died, and the characters in the story are trying to reverse that. Mm-hmm. And so in the end, have your time travel shenanigans, but instead of somehow that landed weirdly, course correcting everything that's happened, instead, I think this is a story that could only work in, like, a comic book. I don't know if it would work in a movie, where it's like the main universe is now course corrected to be the one where she lives.
Right.
But now all these characters are living in essentially an alternate universe where all their efforts didn't change their reality, but it changed another one.
Right. And there was actually an anime that kind of dealt with that. Don't ask me what. It was really good, what I saw of it, but it was one of those things where you have to watch it with someone else so that you can be, like, discussing it, because it's not something you can just really... Like, they're trying to, like, course correct, essentially, by sending one person back from the future so that they can fix the future.
Because that's essentially...
Or sending them back to the past.
That's essentially the story of Days of Future Past. Except they don't show you the little bit that happens afterwards when it's like, we sent Kitty Pryde's, like, mind back in time to stop these events from happening.
Right.
And at the end of the story, that apocalypse story continues. Because, yes, now that doesn't happen in the main Marvel universe. It still happens in that timeline.
Don't even start me with the X-Men.
The timeline doesn't stop. That timeline continues. And then eventually, Rachel Summers, which is Cyclops and Jean Grey's daughter, goes back in time far enough that she now is connected back into the main timeline, and then goes forward enough, being like, why didn't it work? And they're like, it did work. It just didn't work for you. And since then, she's just been hanging out with the regular universe. She's like, well, fuck those guys.
Yeah, don't even start me with the X. Oh my gosh, they don't even.
Cable and Bishop and oh my god.
They don't even like. Fox doesn't even know what it's doing.
I'm just talking about the comics. Yeah, getting into the movies.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm talking the movies. Like Fox doesn't even know what they're doing. with themselves.
Well,
but they won't.
They don't have to worry about it anymore.
But it's so far entangled in its own contradictions.
Yeah.
That you can't really, like, because I mean.
You want to, it's human nature to look for a pattern.
Well, even just within, like, there's contradictions in...
Oh, all over those movies.
Yeah, you've got the contradictions of, of Days of Future Past with both Logan, with the Wolverine movie, and then the original,
yeah, and then
like, 3 movies.
X-Men Origins is just this big, like, spoonful of just awfulness that ruins everything.
Right. I mean, like, you just, it's so many, like, you no longer know what to think of as being the universe or the reality that we're looking at. They're so far all over the place that you couldn't even time travel to fix it. Because you'd have to go so far back.
Because even X-Men 3, The Last Stand, had a scene in it. Oh, yeah, I know. Preaching to the choir. Where a digitally de-aged Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen visit...
right, they visit Jean
and her parents. But then they try to explain that that's still the same universe as the one where... oh my God, what are the actors from the new timeline? I can't remember. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. But they look totally different. Right.
You've got that. And then you've got, I mean, it's just, there's so much that they don't even understand what they're
set that up, but they also have her in that movie.
Right.
And then the next movie is your opportunity to, like, course correct and make sure things line up, and they go the other direction.
They do. That's my thing. Well, that's what I mean. Like, Days of Future Past just completely is like, oh yeah, he was already in the 70s, like, before he got his thing, the adamantium skeleton. He had the adamantium skeleton in the 70s, and then over here you're like, no, he was injected at that same time period. Like, what? And then it's because he goes back to his past self, but with his adamantium.
Yeah.
And he's in New York or Washington, D.C. or wherever it was that he popped up in the past. And I'm just like, shouldn't he be in Canada at this point in time? Like, I don't get it, guys.
Or there's something the comics did recently that's less time travel and more just like, and I don't think that we ever got an answer. Maybe we did and I just didn't hear it. But in the new X-Men relaunch, which has been, I haven't been reading, but it's been kind of interesting to just hear about through the grapevine. The X-Men and the rest of the mutants have sort of declared themselves their own sovereign state by moving into this, like, weird sentient mutant island.
Oh, okay.
And have been able to fund this by communicating with the island in order to grow a specific flower that could be manufactured into a medicine that would, like, increase the human lifespan and stuff like that and cure certain diseases. And so the idea that by selling that medication, it would bring them legitimacy.
Oh, okay.
And it would make humanity more dependent on them. And it's this weird collection of, like, both good mutants and bad mutants have all just like joined together on this. Like, Apocalypse is just like cool. Like,
oh my God.
The last person you'd expect to be like kumbaya, he's over there drinking the Kool-Aid.
Oh,
like,
good Lord.
But there's a part where humanity is panicking in response to this, and so, like, a combination of members of, like, AIM and Hydra and SHIELD combined together, and they're building a facility that's, like, orbiting the sun or something like that. And it's essentially going to be, like, the facility they're going to use to build, like, the ultimate Sentinels.
Okay.
Essentially. And the story has its own time travel elements because of a character who they've introduced as a mutant who has the ability to, when she dies, to not essentially reincarnate, but, like, reset with all of her memories back into her body as an infant and then live her life again.
Oh,
and
goodness.
it keeps happening. And so she's able to live into the future, see what's going to happen.
Right, and then go back.
And change it, see what happens because of those changes, and then go back again. So she's on, like, her 9th or 10th life at this point, and she comes to Charles Xavier, and she's like, your idea is not going to work.
Right.
Like, mutants and humans are going to fight. They're going to kill each other.
Right.
And so Professor X we meet in this story is, like, totally different to the point where, like, A, he could walk. So that never happened because Moira made sure it didn't happen. And B, he wears a version of Cerebro that exists as a helmet. It's kind of funny. It's got a big X on his face. And all you see is like the bottom half of his face. So there's already enough theories of like that's not even Professor X.
Right.
But they invent a machine that essentially allows them to bring mutants back from the dead.
Okay.
By combining enough mutants and the plants from the planet, Professor X is able to take like a psychic imprint of the mutants and then grow them. And so there's an incident where a bunch of the X-Men fly out to that station on the planet, and the humans in response like blow up the station.
No.
So the entire away team dies, including Wolverine. The next session they bring him back, and everything's great. Except somehow Wolverine still has adamantium claws. And I'm like, what?
Which is really, I think, the bigger problem is that it makes no sense.
So either A, you somehow got this entire process to work where you recreated him
exactly how he is.
With the metal, like, or B, you recreated him and then forced him to go through the procedure again.
Oh my gosh,
I don't know which one is worse.
I don't either.
But I remember people blowing up about it because it's just like, what? Because all the others, it makes sense. They regrow like Cyclops, and like Professor X hands him a visor so he doesn't fucking like laser people's face off. And it's this weird like biblical moment where it also like weirdly echoes Galactus.
Okay.
Like when they're reborn, Professor X is there and he's like, to me, my X-Men.
Right.
And it's like, but then Wolverine's got his claws and we're all just like, what? Should he have bone claws? Like,
right, which I think at the very end of the day is really like my biggest problem with Days of Future Past is like he's supposed to be like consciously going into his former body like of the time, but that doesn't match the timeline of Wolverine.
You guys have already established that
like he shouldn't have his adamantium.
Alkali Lake or whatever it's called.
Right.
Took place like early 2000s based off of everything you guys have put into the movies.
Right.
And yet somehow now it took place before the 70s.
Right. And that's like I think at the end of the day that's probably my biggest problem is that they can't
held
even
up really good.
I know.
But yes, no, it's dumb.
It is.
It's dumb. This has been the X-Men movies are dumb tangent.
Right.
We've been going for like 10 minutes. But I think that's what makes time travel difficult to write.
Yes, exactly.
It's a fun story. It's fun to play with, but it's really hard to pull together.
Right. Well, it's one of those things where you can really only go into the future without making it an impossibility. You know what I mean? Like you going into the past brings up problems. Like there was an episode of The Outer Limits. It wasn't the one that we all know, The Twilight Zone. It wasn't, it was the other one. And like there's an episode where someone goes back in time to kill baby Hitler. Because, Because
that's what you do.
We can't talk about time travel without talking about someone trying to go back and kill baby Hitler.
This conversation.
But yeah, she goes back in time to kill baby Hitler. She succeeds in killing baby Hitler, but in response, Hitler's dad just kidnaps this Roma kid and is like, oh yeah, you're Hitler now. You're Adolf Hitler.
Hitler 2, Electric Boogaloo.
So, like, she dies. original baby Hitler dies, but
The universe course corrected.
exactly. So like that's the problem with going back in the future or back to the past, is that you can't really go back without ruining everything that was there, which is why I think like Back to the Future worked, is because you go back, you change things, then what you left behind is not what you left behind anymore.
That's true, yeah.
So
at the very end of Back to the Future, the future that Marty's returning to is not his future.
It's not the world he knew.
It worked out really well for him, so he's not complaining.
Right,
but it's definitely not his future.
Because things were changed. And that's why I think that gets it right. But most everybody else, they're like, oh no, it's fine. And we're just sitting here going,
people miss that point at the very end of the movie, because it's all like, happy ending, yeah. And it's like...
Right. But in reality, it's
totally
not.
different reality.
Exactly. That. So instead of the paradox that would be, you get, things change. The world is different.
Well, then I think for our pitch, what we really need to see, either from Hollywood or another store, like another format, medium works too, works better, is a time travel story that embraces a more multiversal role.
Yes.
Instead of just one little switch and everything's fine.
Right.
Exploring the idea, sort of that butterfly effect, blossoming that, yes, you can go back in time to make one change, but now the future exists in multiple different timelines.
Things,
and the one
you make the changes, and those, go through however long, the years or decades that you have gone through, and
I could almost see like a what was that? Amazon had it as a series. I don't know if it's still going or not, but it was the I can't remember it. It's the one where instead of the Allies winning the war, the Axis, the Man in the High Castle.
Man in the High Castle. So that actually exists in a whole different universe where the
Yes.
wars played out very differently, other than us losing.
But I can see a film where the opening act is someone from the future, like a hit squad from the future, gets sent back in time to take care of one of the world's war criminals of history, whichever one they want to pick out, and then by doing so, create a branching timeline, and the rest of the film is them trying to figure out if there's any way for them to get back home, and what home even is now.
Right.
And I could see that having a potentially bleak ending, because I don't see how those two different stories would be really interesting to have, like, maybe they have some way of communicating between the two realities.
It's kind of like Man in the High Castle,
Sort of,
like
yeah.
they do with the films and the series, because it's not films in the original book, because books in the original.
Right, but isn't there something where they can communicate with our world or something like that?
There's ways for them for that information to kind of get over, so that you can see what the world could have been, but isn't. Right, yeah, and that's, and I think, we need to stop Hollywood and other formats need to stop pretending that the only option is the straight path, instead of the branching. Like, we're not the trunk anymore, guys. We need to branch. And embrace that multiverse
like
kind of feel.
Really, like, depending on when the story takes place and how things bounce around, I can see like a really like surprisingly like bitter twist ending when the characters have to accept the fact that because of the actions they've made, the world for them is completely different. Right. And there's no going back. There is no reset button.
Right. They can't go back to the world that they knew.
You could have that whole scene where someone tries to go back to stop themselves from doing something, and you have the whole like gun drawn on the bad guy, and then across the room, gone, drawn on that guy, and it's the
Right.
same person.
Right,
And then
because he
you get
doesn't
into
want that to happen.
But then you get to the paradox of, can I if it's already happened, can you stop it from happening?
Right.
Yeah.
And to play with that is like actually embracing that like a paradox is not something that can happen. You know, that if that it would be this endless loop, like that would, I feel, would be a fun way to play with it. You know, take and like embrace the paradox and then work with it, you know, makes it.
Because then you can play into like, is like, do the laws of the universe, you know, like how does the universe like work in the, like, if a character has the ability to go back in time and then not only meet themselves but then attempt to stop themselves from doing an action that they have already done, how does like physics work? Like,
Right.
does reality itself step in like, no, like,
Right.
you can't do that.
Exactly. And
or is it instead, it's like, now that's a branching timeline that goes nowhere.
Right.
And so, like, that's like a dead limb on a tree. The tree still goes, but that
Right.
limb is dead.
Just kind of chill. It's hanging there like, Yeah, no, and that's, they pretend like paradoxes don't exist, and that's really
I'm
where
just
it
imagining,
bugs
like,
me.
An assassination attempt. The original mission goes down, and then the character tries to go back to stop himself from doing it, but like things keep happening that stop it from happening, that line up with the original like first act.
Right.
So like there's a part where he, like, the guy who's about to pull the trigger hears someone coming from behind him, and then like without fully seeing the target, turns and shoots.
Okay.
And it's revealed that it's our guy who misses his window to stop him because he dodged the bullet. So he has to go back again.
Right, and that's one of those things. Like, if you do it right, you could make it.
Because that's essentially what happened in Time Crimes. Is the first time he goes in the machine, he's just running from himself because he doesn't understand.
Right.
But then by the third or fourth loop, he's doing things a specific way in order to keep the timeline moving.
Right.
He meets a scientist when he goes through time who's like, whatever you do, you can't stop yourself from doing something.
Right.
So you have to make it work. And that's essentially what Time Crimes is. As an accident, what happens in the movie, someone dies who he presumes to be his wife. Mm-hmm. And so he goes back again, even though the doctor's like, if she's dead, you can't do anything.
Right.
But in the end, we find out it wasn't the wife, it was another character who dies instead. So in his mind, he's like, I saved my wife. When in reality, it's like, well, she died because you went back in time. Like,
right, and
if anything, you still killed this person, but at least it wasn't your wife.
Right, and the Time Machine, the movie too, played with that. It's like he builds the time machine to try and save his fiance, but every time he goes back and changes, she still dies.
Yeah.
So he goes to the future trying to figure out, but he ends up going too far into the future, and like the leader of the Morlocks in the future is like, you can't undo it, because if you undo it, you never build the time machine, and you can't undo it. So no matter what, she has to die for the time machine to be built.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only way to make this work, because you only built it because she died.
Yeah, I can definitely see a very like a bitter twist ending where the character has to finally accept that there's nothing else he can do.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that would definitely fall on your drama line, but you could have fun with it too.
Oh, yeah. Just don't go the Futurama, I'm my own grandpa route.
Oh, God, please don't. Yeah, no, that's awful.
And on that terrible note, we're going to bring this episode to a close. What do you think? What are your favorite parts of time travel? Are we right about our pitch? Or is there something obvious that we're missing? Let us know. And have a good one.
Bye.
Hey everybody, it's Nate again. Just thanking you for listening to our episode and reminding you about nonessentialmedia.com, the website that you can find our podcast plus several other podcasts from my very excellent friends and fellow podcasters, including Beach City Crows and Lifecast, both of which are fantastic podcasts I heavily recommend. And just a heads up, in case you missed it in the intro, we are planning another Retcon episode for December. In the holiday spirit, we're going to be doing the Santa Claus 3, which I've never seen before. So I'm really curious, A, to watch the film, because I know this is a series that matters to Cheyenne, but also to see what changes I can make with it to reflect those creative muscles to try to make it a better film. So tune in for that, and yeah, we'll see you guys then.